For years, no one went near the abandoned village. The houses had been empty for so long that nature had begun reclaiming everything. Roofs had collapsed. Windows were shattered. The narrow streets that once carried families and children were now covered in tall grass and creeping vines. Most people who lived nearby avoided the place completely. Some said it felt eerie. Others simply said it was sad, like visiting a memory that had been forgotten by time. But every now and then, travelers passing through the nearby forest would report something strange, something that didn't quite belong in a place that had been abandoned for so long. They said they had seen a dog, not just once, but many times. A brown dog, wandering slowly between the empty houses. At first, people assumed it was simply a stray. Stray dogs often move from place to place searching for food. But what made this dog different was one simple detail. The dog never seemed to leave. No matter the weather, no matter the season, the dog always returned to the same spot, in the middle of the ruins, as if he were guarding something or waiting for someone. And that was the story that eventually reached Daniel. Daniel had been working with animal rescue groups for nearly 8 years. During that time, he had seen many difficult situations. Dogs abandoned on highways, puppies left in cardboard boxes, animals rescued from dangerous environments. But something about this story stayed in his mind. A dog surviving alone inside an abandoned village for years? That was unusual. Dogs that survive on their own usually roam large areas searching for food and water. They don't stay in one place, unless they have a reason. And Daniel wanted to know what that reason was. One cool morning just after sunrise, Daniel packed his truck and began driving toward the location the hikers had described. The road leading there slowly changed as he drove. At first, it was a normal paved road. Then it became cracked and uneven. Soon, the pavement disappeared entirely. Tall grass grew between the stones, and the forest seemed to close in around the narrow path. Eventually, Daniel saw the first signs of the village. Old wooden houses appeared between the trees. Many of them were leaning slightly to one side. Some roofs had collapsed completely. Rust covered the metal gates and fences. It looked like time had simply stopped there. Daniel parked his truck near the edge of the road. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at the empty village. The silence was deep, the kind of silence that only exists in places that people have forgotten. Then Daniel stepped forward and began walking. At first, he saw nothing, just broken buildings and overgrown yards. But then, he noticed something on the ground. Footprints, small prints pressed into the dirt between patches of grass. Daniel knelt down. They were fresh, dog tracks, and they were heading deeper into the village. Slowly, carefully, Daniel began following them. Each step carried him further between the abandoned houses. The footprints passed old vehicles that had rusted into the earth. They passed broken fences and empty gardens. Then suddenly, Daniel stopped. Something moved. From behind the corner of an old building, a dog stepped out. The brown dog stood about 30 feet away. His body was thin but not weak. His fur was rough and dusty, but his eyes were sharp, alert, watching every movement Daniel made. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The dog tilted his head slightly. Daniel slowly lowered his hands, trying to appear calm. But before he could take a single step, the dog turned and ran. Within seconds, he disappeared behind one of the ruined houses. Daniel hurried forward, but when he reached the corner, the dog was gone, as if he had vanished into the village itself. Daniel spent another hour searching the area, but the dog did not appear again. Still, something about the encounter stayed with him. The dog had not looked completely wild. Wild dogs often show signs of aggression or extreme fear. This dog had seemed cautious, careful, but not dangerous. It almost felt as if the dog had been studying him, trying to understand whether Daniel was a threat or something else. Eventually, Daniel returned to his truck, but before leaving, he looked back toward the village, and he knew one thing for certain: he would return. 2 days later, Daniel came back. This time, he brought food. He placed a small bowl near the center of the village where he had first seen the dog. Then he sat down on the steps of an old building and waited. Minutes passed, then half an hour. The wind moved through the empty streets. Still, nothing. Just when Daniel was beginning to think the dog might not appear that day, he saw movement again, far down the road. The brown dog had returned, but this time, he did not run. Instead, he stood quietly, watching, studying Daniel from a distance. And that was when Daniel realized something important. The dog wasn't just wandering. He was protecting something. The dog stood far down the road. He did not approach the bowl. He did not growl. He simply stood there, watching. The wind moved gently through the grass between them. For several long moments, the two remained completely still. Daniel had learned something important over the years while rescuing animals. Trust could not be forced. It had to be earned, slowly, patiently, sometimes over days or even weeks. So instead of standing up, Daniel stayed where he was. He kept his movements calm and quiet. The dog tilted his head slightly. His ears moved forward and backward, carefully listening. Daniel could see that the dog was studying him, trying to understand something, trying to decide whether this stranger was dangerous or different. After a few minutes, the dog slowly began walking toward the bowl, step by step. Each movement was cautious. His body remained low to the ground, ready to run if necessary. When he reached the food, he paused again. He looked up toward Daniel. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Then the dog lowered his head and began eating. Daniel did not move. He didn't even speak. He simply sat there quietly while the dog finished the meal. When the bowl was empty, the dog stepped back. He looked at Daniel one more time. Then he turned and walked away. But this time, he didn't run. Daniel stayed in the village for nearly 2 more hours that day. He wanted to understand the dog's behavior, and as he quietly explored the area, he began noticing something unusual. The dog seemed to follow a very specific path through the village, from one broken house to another, then toward the center road. But eventually, every path led back to the same place, a 2-story house near the middle of the village. It was one of the largest buildings still standing, though time had damaged it badly. The wooden door hung slightly open. Several windows were broken. The roof sagged in the middle. Yet somehow, the house still stood, and the dog always returned there. Daniel watched from a distance as the dog slowly approached the building. The dog stopped near the doorway. He sniffed the ground carefully. Then he disappeared inside. Daniel waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, the dog emerged again and walked toward the road, as if he had just finished checking on something important. That was the moment Daniel realized something. The dog wasn't just living in the village. He was guarding that house. As the sun began lowering toward the horizon, Daniel returned to his truck, but the image of the dog entering the house stayed in his mind. Why would a dog stay in one place for so long? Dogs are naturally social animals. They look for companionship, for safety, for food. Yet this dog had chosen to remain in a village that had been abandoned for years. There had to be a reason, and Daniel was beginning to suspect that the answer might be inside that house. But he knew one thing. If he rushed the situation, the dog might disappear completely. So instead of approaching the house that day, Daniel decided to return again, and again, and again, until the dog trusted him enough to allow him closer. Because sometimes, the most important rescues are not about saving a life quickly. They are about understanding a story that has been unfolding for years. And Daniel had a feeling that this dog's story was far from simple. As the days passed, Daniel continued returning to the village. Each morning he brought fresh food, and each morning the dog appeared again. At first, the distance between them remained the same, 30 feet, sometimes 40. The dog always stayed just far enough away to feel safe. But something had changed. The dog was no longer running away immediately. Instead, he stayed, watching, studying, learning. And Daniel was learning too. He began noticing the dog's routine. Every morning, the dog would appear from the same direction. He would circle the old road once, sometimes stopping near the broken fence across the street, sometimes sniffing the grass where wild rabbits had passed during the night. But eventually, without fail, the dog always returned to the same house, the house in the center of the village. At first, Daniel had avoided getting too close. He didn't want to frighten the dog, but after several days of quiet visits, the dog began allowing Daniel to move a little closer, 10 feet closer, then 15, until finally one afternoon, Daniel found himself standing just outside the house. The dog watched him carefully from the yard, but he did not run. The door to the house hung crookedly on its hinges. The wood had faded from years of sun and rain. Slowly, Daniel stepped forward. He gently pushed the door open. It creaked loudly as it moved. For a moment, Daniel paused, listening, but the house remained silent. Carefully, he stepped inside. Dust covered everything. The floorboards were dry and cracked. Spider webs stretched across the corners of the ceiling. But despite the years of abandonment, the house still held signs that people once lived there. Old chairs sat near a small wooden table. A cracked mirror hung on the wall, and scattered across the floor were faded photographs. Daniel picked one up. It showed a smiling family standing outside the very same house. A man, a woman, and a young boy. Beside them stood a dog, a brown dog. Daniel slowly looked toward the doorway. Outside, the stray dog was sitting quietly, watching him. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The dog in the photograph looked just like the one standing outside. Same fur color, same shape, same gentle eyes. Daniel felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. He walked deeper into the house. The air inside smelled old and dry, like wood that had been left untouched for too long. In the corner of the room, he saw something else. A small dog bed. The fabric was torn and faded, but it was still there. And beside it lay an old leather collar. Daniel knelt down. He picked it up carefully. The metal tag attached to the collar was scratched, but one word was still readable: Rusty. Daniel looked back toward the doorway again. The dog outside lifted his head slightly, as if he understood the name. Rusty. For years, the dog had remained here, not wandering far, not leaving the house behind, because this had been his home. This had been his family's house, and when they disappeared, Rusty had stayed, waiting, guarding, hoping. Daniel slowly placed the collar back down. His heart felt heavier now, but at the same time, something else was growing stronger. Determination. Rusty had waited long enough, and Daniel knew he had to help him. Outside the doorway, Rusty stood up. For a moment, the dog looked toward the house. Then he looked back at Daniel. And for the first time since Daniel had arrived in the village, Rusty took a few slow steps toward him. Not close enough to touch, but Daniel stepped back outside slowly. Rusty was still standing in the yard. The dog had not moved far from the doorway. He watched Daniel carefully, his ears shifting slightly with every movement. For a moment, the two simply looked at one another. Daniel wondered how many people had walked through this village over the years and never noticed the dog who had been living here. How many days had Rusty waited outside that house? How many nights had he slept alone in the quiet ruins? Daniel crouched down slowly near the doorway. He didn't try to approach the dog. Instead, he placed a small piece of food on the ground between them. Rusty's nose twitched immediately. The smell drifted through the warm afternoon air, but Rusty didn't rush forward. He took one slow step, then another, each movement cautious, deliberate. His body stayed low, ready to retreat if necessary. Daniel remained completely still. Animals notice every small movement, every change in posture, even the direction of your eyes. After several seconds, Rusty reached the food and picked it up gently. He chewed slowly, then looked up again. Their eyes met once more. But this time, something had changed. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with curiosity and perhaps the smallest hint of hope. Over the next several days, Daniel returned again and again. Every visit followed the same quiet routine. Daniel would arrive early in the morning. He would sit near the house, and Rusty would appear somewhere nearby. Sometimes Rusty watched from behind a fence. Other times he stood across the road. Occasionally, he even sat near the old well in the center of the village. But no matter where he wandered, he always returned to the same house, and slowly, the distance between them grew smaller. The first day, Rusty stayed 30 feet away. The next day, 20. Then, 15. By the end of the week, Rusty was eating food only a few steps from Daniel. But Rusty still refused to enter the house while Daniel was nearby. Instead, he circled around it, walking slowly along the walls, sniffing the ground, pausing near the windows. It was almost as if he were checking the building, making sure everything was still safe, still the same, still home. One evening, dark clouds gathered over the forest surrounding the village. The wind picked up quickly. Within minutes, the sky turned a deep shade of gray. Daniel had been sitting near the house for nearly an hour when the first drops of rain began falling. At first they were light, but soon the storm grew stronger. Thunder echoed through the hills. Rain poured down onto the broken rooftops. Daniel moved under the small porch attached to the house to stay dry. For several minutes he sat there, listening to the storm. Then suddenly, he heard movement. Rusty ran across the yard. The rain had soaked his fur completely. Instead of stopping at his usual distance, Rusty ran straight toward the house. And for the first time since Daniel had arrived in the village, Rusty entered the doorway while Daniel was there. The dog stopped just inside the entrance. Water dripped from his coat onto the wooden floor. For a moment, Rusty looked uncertain, but the storm outside was loud and powerful. Slowly, cautiously, Rusty walked a little further into the house. Daniel stayed completely still. He didn't want to scare him. The two sat quietly in the old house while rain hammered against the roof above them. Rusty curled up near the old dog bed in the corner. It was the first time Daniel had seen the dog truly relax. For the first time in years, Rusty was not alone during the storm. While Rusty rested, Daniel looked again at the old collar lying beside the bed. The metal tag still carried the name, Rusty. Daniel gently picked it up again. He wondered how long the dog had kept watch over this house. Months? Years? Dogs have remarkable memories. They remember people, places, voices, and sometimes they wait, long after everyone else has moved on. Daniel slowly placed the collar back beside the bed. Then he looked at Rusty. The dog had lifted his head slightly. His eyes were watching Daniel again, but the fear was no longer as strong. Rusty's tail moved slowly against the floor. Just once, a small movement. But for Daniel, it meant everything, because that tiny wag was the first real sign that Rusty was beginning to trust him. And trust is where every rescue truly begins. The storm lasted for nearly an hour. Rain fell heavily against the roof of the old house while thunder rolled across the distant hills. Inside, the broken walls and dusty furniture creaked softly as the wind pushed against the structure. But Rusty didn't move. Curled beside the old dog bed, he remained completely still. Daniel sat quietly across the room, watching him. For the first time since discovering the village, Daniel was seeing Rusty in a different way. Not just as a stray dog surviving alone, but as a dog who had been holding on to something deeply tied to this house, something that had kept him here for years. The storm outside slowly began to fade. The rain softened, and the quiet of the abandoned village returned once again. Rusty lifted his head. He looked toward the doorway, listening to the wind as it moved through the empty streets. Then slowly, he stood. He walked toward the entrance of the house and looked outside. The storm had passed, but instead of leaving the building immediately like he usually did, Rusty turned around and walked back inside. This time, he stopped only a few feet away from Daniel. The two looked at each other. For several seconds, neither moved. Daniel spoke softly. "Hey there, Rusty." The dog's ears twitched at the sound of his name. It was a small reaction, but it was enough to confirm something Daniel had suspected. Rusty remembered. The following morning, Daniel decided to learn more about the history of the village. If Rusty had been living here for years, someone nearby might remember what had happened to his family. So Daniel drove to a small town about 20 minutes away. The town was quiet and peaceful, with only a few small shops and houses. At a small cafe near the main road, Daniel began asking questions. Most people knew the abandoned village. It had once been a farming community many years ago. Families had lived there for generations, but slowly, over time, people moved away. Jobs disappeared, schools closed, stores shut down, and eventually the village became empty. But when Daniel mentioned the brown dog, an elderly woman sitting near the window looked up immediately. "You mean Rusty?" she asked. Daniel nodded. The woman smiled softly. "Yes, I remember him." Her name was Margaret, and she had lived near the village many years ago. Margaret explained that Rusty belonged to a family who had lived in the large house in the center of the village, a couple and their young son. The boy had loved that dog more than anything. Everywhere the boy went, Rusty followed. They played in the fields together, walked through the forest trails, and every afternoon, Rusty waited for the boy outside the school bus stop. They were inseparable, Margaret said. But then, everything changed. Margaret's voice grew quieter as she continued. The family had struggled during the final years of the village. Work had become scarce. Many families were forced to move away in search of better opportunities. Eventually, Rusty's family made the difficult decision to leave as well. Margaret remembered the day clearly. A truck had arrived early in the morning. Boxes were loaded. Furniture was taken away. Neighbors gathered to say goodbye. But during all the confusion, something unexpected happened. Rusty had wandered into the forest nearby. Perhaps chasing a rabbit, perhaps simply exploring like he often did. When the family finally finished loading the truck, they began searching for him. They called his name again and again, but Rusty never appeared. Eventually, with the truck already packed and the long drive ahead of them, the family had no choice. They left. Margaret paused for a moment. When Rusty came back, the house was empty. Daniel felt his chest tighten as he listened. "So, he stayed?" Daniel asked. Margaret nodded slowly. "Yes. At first, everyone thought he would follow the road out of the village. But he didn't. He stayed at the house, every day, waiting." Daniel returned to the abandoned village that afternoon with a heavy heart. Rusty was already there when he arrived, standing near the house, just as he always did. The dog looked toward Daniel's truck. His tail moved slightly, not a full wag, but enough to show recognition. Daniel walked toward him slowly. He placed a bowl of food near the porch. Rusty approached without hesitation this time. He ate calmly while Daniel sat nearby. The trust between them was growing stronger with every visit. But Daniel now understood something important. Rusty had not stayed in the village because he didn't know how to leave. He had stayed because he was waiting for the boy who had once been his best friend, waiting for the family he believed would return. For years, Rusty had kept watch over the only home he had ever known. And Daniel realized that rescuing Rusty would not just mean taking him away from the village. It would mean helping him let go of the past. As the sun slowly set behind the forest, Daniel sat quietly beside Rusty outside the old house. The sky turned shades of orange and purple above the empty streets. Rusty finished his meal and lay down near the porch. For the first time, he rested beside Daniel, not across the yard, not watching from a distance, but close enough to feel safe. Daniel gently reached out his hand. Rusty looked at him. For a moment, the dog hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, Rusty allowed Daniel to touch his head. It was a small moment, but it marked the end of something important. Rusty was no longer guarding the ruins alone. Someone had finally come to help him. And very soon, Rusty's long wait would finally come to an end. The following morning arrived quietly. A soft mist covered the fields surrounding the abandoned village. The air was cool, and the grass was still wet from the storm the night before. Daniel parked his truck near the edge of the road and stepped out slowly. As he looked toward the village, he saw a familiar figure standing near the old house. Rusty was already awake. The dog stood near the porch, watching the road the way he always did. For years, this had been part of his routine. Every morning, Rusty checked the road, perhaps hoping that one day a familiar car would appear, perhaps believing that the family he loved might still return. Daniel walked toward him carefully. Rusty didn't move away. Instead, his tail moved gently back and forth. Not the excited wag of a playful dog, but the calm movement of recognition. Rusty knew him now. Daniel placed the food bowl on the ground. Rusty ate quietly while Daniel sat nearby. For several minutes, the two simply enjoyed the peaceful morning. But Daniel knew something important. Today would be different. Because today, Rusty was going to leave the village. From his bag, Daniel slowly removed a leash. It was simple and soft, designed to make rescued dogs feel comfortable. Rusty noticed it immediately. His ears lifted slightly. Daniel spoke calmly. "It's okay, Rusty. We're going somewhere better." Rusty stepped back for a moment. The leash was unfamiliar, and Rusty had survived alone for a long time. Freedom had become part of his life. Daniel didn't rush. Instead, he placed the leash on the ground. He allowed Rusty to sniff it. The dog circled slowly, curious, cautious. Finally, Rusty stepped closer. Daniel gently reached forward and attached the leash to the old collar. For a brief moment, Rusty froze, but Daniel kept his hand resting softly on the dog's neck. "It's okay," he whispered. Rusty relaxed. And just like that, the first step of the rescue was complete. Daniel stood up slowly. Rusty followed. At first, they only walked a few steps. Rusty stopped and looked back toward the house. The old doorway stood open, the place where he had spent so many years waiting, the place where he had slept, where he had watched the road, where he had protected the memories of the family he loved. For a moment, Rusty didn't move. Daniel understood. This place had been Rusty's entire world. Leaving it behind would not be easy. Daniel knelt beside him. "You've waited long enough, buddy," he said softly. Rusty looked toward Daniel. Then slowly, he turned his head away from the house and began walking, step by step, down the road, out of the village. For the first time in years, Rusty was leaving the ruins behind. Rusty hesitated slightly when he reached the truck. Vehicles were not something he remembered clearly. Daniel opened the passenger door and gently encouraged him forward. Rusty sniffed the seat, then carefully climbed inside. The truck door closed, and a few moments later, the engine started. As they drove away, Rusty looked out the window. The abandoned village slowly disappeared behind them. The broken houses, the empty streets, the old home he had guarded for so long. Rusty watched until the buildings vanished behind the trees. Then he rested his head quietly on the seat. His long wait was finally over. The rescue center was located on a quiet piece of land surrounded by open fields. When Daniel arrived, several volunteers were already there. They had heard about Rusty, and they were eager to meet the dog who had survived alone for so many years. Rusty stepped carefully out of the truck. The new environment was unfamiliar. New smells, new sounds, new people. But Daniel stayed close beside him. The volunteers spoke softly and moved slowly. They didn't want to overwhelm him. Rusty watched everything carefully. Then something unexpected happened. Another dog approached. A friendly golden retriever named Max. Max wagged his tail and greeted Rusty gently. Rusty sniffed him. For a moment, the two dogs stood quietly together. Then Rusty's tail wagged. It was the first real wag Daniel had seen. Rusty was beginning to relax. Over the next several weeks, Rusty slowly adjusted to his new life. At first, he remained cautious. Loud noises made him nervous. Sudden movements caused him to step back. But day by day, those fears faded. The volunteers gave him patience, food, warm bedding, gentle care, and most importantly, companionship. Rusty began playing with the other dogs. He learned to trust the people around him. His thin frame slowly grew stronger. His fur became healthier, and his eyes, once filled with loneliness, began to shine again. The dog who had once lived among ruins was discovering something new: happiness. Several months later, a couple arrived at the rescue center looking to adopt a dog. They had recently lost their elderly pet and were ready to open their home again. As they walked through the shelter, many dogs barked excitedly, but one dog remained calm. Rusty. He sat quietly near the fence, watching them. The couple stopped. "There's something special about that one," the woman said. Daniel smiled. "His name is Rusty." He told them the entire story. The abandoned village, the years of waiting, the rescue. The woman knelt beside Rusty. Rusty approached slowly, then gently rested his head against her hand. The decision was immediate. Rusty had found his new family. On the day Rusty left the rescue center, the volunteers gathered near the gate. Rusty walked beside his new family toward the car. His tail wagged happily. His steps were confident. As the car drove away, Rusty looked out the window again. But this time, he wasn't watching a village disappear behind him. He was looking toward a future, a home, a family who would never leave him behind. Some dogs wait far longer than they should. They wait with loyalty, with hope, with hearts that never stop believing. Rusty waited for years in the ruins of an empty village. But in the end, his story became something beautiful. Because every dog deserves a second chance, and Rusty finally found his.